So for some reason, I've decided that there are no more books in the world that I want to read. This is obviously delusion. There are thousands upon thousands of books that I want to read, but something came into my head last night that said, there's nothing left. You've read them all. I think what it is that most of the books I'm really excited about reading right now are pretty new and they're not available at my library yet. And so I'm lost. I was just scrolling through list after list of recommendations and they all looked like garbage to me for no reason. Like, this is truly just delusion, and yet it is ruining my life. So I'm going to go to the library today and I'm going to look on the shelves and try to find some books that I've never heard anything about to convince myself that even if I don't hear things talked about on the internet or see them in lists, I will still always be able to find books that I'm interested in reading. So I'm going to kind of take you with me. Not really, because I do have some shame and I'm never going to be a person who vlogs in public, but we're going to go and I'm going to show you how I pick books that I've never heard anything about, and then I'm going to read them and we're going to see if I'm actually good at it or not, and if you should take my advice. So that's my plan for the day. I'm going to head down to a bigger branch of my local library and see what I can find. If I get down there and there's nothing that I want to read, honestly, it's obviously just like a really bad reading slump that I'm entering into, I think. But if there's nothing that I can find, I'm going to have to reconsider my life. Like, what am I going to do with my spare time if not read? I need to go. I'm sure I'll be able to find things. I'll see you when I get back. Okay, so that trip to the library absolutely revived me. I picked out 4 books for this video, and then I also found 2 more books on the shelf that I want to read, but I've heard things about these books. The other ones, fresh, brand new. So I'm going to tell you how I picked these 4 books, and I do want to say that this is going to sound really obvious, but I think maybe some people are interested in knowing how to do this because it can be really overwhelming when you get to a bookstore or a library and there's just so many books in front of you. When I wrote this down, I thought, is this helping anyone? And maybe it's going to seem like I'm really over explaining this to you, but there is a specific order that I think is important when you're picking books you don't know anything about. So the first thing you need to do when you get in front of the shelf is get comfortable. This can't be this kind of frenzied thing where you're just looking all around you. You need to have some sort of methodology. You can pick any shelf you want, just sit in front of a shelf and look at the spine of every book on that shelf. We are judging books by their covers here. You have to. There are so many books. If you're not into horror, you're not going to want books that have a horror spine or a thriller spine or a romance spine. There are genres, and you can see them on the spines of these books. When you're reading literary fiction, it's harder to tell what you're going to like. You can rule out a lot of things, but you have to be pretty picky anyway. When you see a font that you like, pull that book out and take a look at it. At this stage, looking at the spines, I am also specifically looking for thinner books. I think that they're a lot easier to take a chance on. That's why I picked up this book. It's tiny. I also recognize this spine as being a book from Coffee House Press, which is a publisher that I have really enjoyed some books that I've read from them in the past, so that helped as well. That's something a lot of this is just things that you're going to learn through practice and through more reading, recognizing publishers that you like, which is so insane. Never thought I would be saying that because that sounds so fucking pretentious. So once you've identified a font that you like and you pull the book off the shelf, the very first thing we're looking at, we're making sure that the cover isn't hideous or isn't giving us a message that it's a book that we're not interested in reading. I pulled this book off the shelf and I liked that it was thin and I liked the font on the spine. I did not like the cover as much. It didn't really indicate to me that it was something I wanted to read. Usually I would put a book back at this point, but it was so thin, I was like, let me just flip to the back and see what it says. First sentence, it says historical fiction. I put it back. I know I'm not interested in that. This book here was actually displayed on the shelf, so I never even saw the spine, and I don't know if it would have stood out to me. It's very plain, but this cover did stand out to me, and I'm really glad that I ended up picking it up and looking at it. That is an awesome fucking cover. Whoever designed that needs an award. So with this method, we're trying to rule things out as quickly as possible because there will just be too many books, and it's so fucking overwhelming. So you have to be picky. If you don't like the cover, put it back. If you are a little bit interested, the next thing that I think you need to do is look not at the summary, but at the blurbs. Here, if you're someone who reads a lot of books or consumes a lot of book-related content, you are looking for authors and names of books that you recognize. We need to have someone vouching for this. If there's nothing that you recognize, it's a little bit suspicious. Not that there aren't great books that have very few blurbs, great debuts out there, but it can be really convincing to have someone whose name you recognize writing a blurb for a book. This also tells you a lot about the genre of the book, especially if it's not like genre fiction, like you're reading literary fiction. I'm into like dark literary fiction, and so when I recognize names, I can see, like, I can think of what kind of books these authors write and assume that this book will be in a similar vein. So for this book, the cover I did love. I flipped to the back and I saw Samantha Schweblin had blurbed it, and I've heard great things about her books, and I know that she writes a genre that I'm really interested in reading. For this book, I saw the cover, loved it, flipped to the back, and saw Jessamine Chan, who wrote The School for Good Mothers, a book that I thought was pretty good. Patrick Cottrell, who wrote Sorry to Disrupt the Peace, a book that I loved, and I'm really interested in reading more books similar to it. And then other authors who I haven't read, but I do recognize their names. And that was very convincing with this. If you're still interested in the book at this point, this is where we go to the summary. You're trying to spend the least amount of time on these books as possible, or else it's just so overwhelming trying to pick. If you read 100 summaries instead of just looking at the names on the blurbs, you are not going to remember anything. You're going to have such a hard time choosing between the books that you are interested in. So I'm trying to get us at the summary. This is like the last point of convincing us. So for me personally, I don't want to know a lot about books before reading them. And so when I read a summary, I stop as soon as I know I'm interested in the book. If I read the entire summary, usually that means this isn't a book I'm all that compelled by. So at this point, if you're someone who reads the whole summary, you can't really use that as a metric. I would say if there is something in this summary that you are so interested in reading, you're like, I would pick this book up right now, or this will be the next book that I read, then I think you should grab it. If you're like, oh, it seems fine, maybe there's something interesting in here, you have no one other than maybe the authors on the back. You have no one who has told you that this is a good book, and so it can be hard to like trust your instinct that there might be something good in here, and I would recommend just putting it back. I'm sure there are other books on the shelf that you will find more interesting. So finally, you can do a little flip through. I don't like to do this because I don't like to know anything. My partner reading books will look at the text and like actually read paragraphs from the middle of the book, which is absolutely wild to me. I could never do that. But if I'm kind of unconvinced, what I will do is look at chapter length. I find books with short chapters incredibly easy to read, and books with long chapters a lot more difficult to read. So if a book has short chapters, like I noticed this book did, that will compel me one way or the other. So with all that probably unnecessary information out of the way, I'm going to show you the books that I ended up picking with that method, if you could really call it a method. It seems like just the obvious way, but maybe it's not. I don't know. People ask me how I pick books. That's why I'm telling you, okay? For some reason, I'm embarrassed. I feel like I've just like over-explained something so much. So like I said, this book I picked up because it's very thin and because I recognize the publisher. This is Argentinian literature, which is always my favorite. And I thought that the summary made it seem really dark and strange. It's about a bunch of doctors who embark on a grisly series of experiments to investigate the line between life and death. I stopped reading at that point of the summary because that sounded interesting enough to me. Even though this is set in 1907, which typically is something that I would see in the first line of a summary and I would put the book back, I feel like I would like this book, and so I grabbed it. This one, I saw this fantastic cover sitting on the shelf, and I had to pick it up and look at it. I read the summary and saw that it was about motherhood. It took me till the end of the summary to really be compelled because I wasn't sure if it was going to have like an interest for me, really. It's about a woman and she's feeling isolated from her support system and like kind of dealing with new motherhood. And she meets this guy, I think he's dying, her neighbor. And then soon they're both running out of time and something is bound to crack. And that sounds like there will be plot in this. I also flipped through this and saw that the chapters were really short, which means that I know I will be able to read it even if it doesn't have a ton of plot or isn't all that interesting to me, though it does seem like it's going to have something to say. This is the book that I was most unsure on, but I thought that it could be really interesting and unique and different from things that I typically read. As far as I know, I haven't read the whole summary because I don't like to do that. This is about a woman who's defecting from North Korea and she's on this like journey to escape. This is another book that convinced me because of its short chapters. I opened it up and saw that chapter 13 was on page 102, which gives me the information that the chapters are on average less than 10 pages, and that's awesome and super readable. Even if the book isn't that good, it will not be garbage to read. The last book I pulled was this one. I recognized from the cover that this was probably going to be something about technology based off of this font and the bubble that it's in, and like, I don't know, it's not capitalized, like it feels like a question edition. It's called Do You Remember Being Born? This reminded me of a book that I really loved called Several People Are Typing, and it looks a little bit experimental, which Several People Are Typing was like such a fucking gimmick. It was awesome. Oh my god. I hugely recommend that book. This seems to be about a woman. She's like 75. She's a poet, and she's hired to write poetry collaborating with artificial intelligence. I think that sounds like it could be really fun, and I'm desperately seeking out something that is similar to Several People Are Typing, so that's kind of the reason that I ended up picking it up. Though on the back, I saw that Alex Olin blurbed it, and I read her short story collection. I thought it was fucking garbage, so maybe I needed to stick to my methods a little bit stronger with this one, but this feels like something that I will pick up like right away. Like, I want to read this. I'm really interested in what this book is trying to do. So that's the plan. I'm going to read these and I'm going to tell you about them, and we're going to see if my ideas of what they were about and what they were going to be like hold up based off of what I thought when I was sitting in the library and what I thought when I actually read them. Okay, I think I'm going to start with the smallest one because I am really worried that I'm entering into a reading slump, even though I do feel mildly cured. So I will get back to you once I've read this so we can talk about it. Hello, I'm here to talk to you about Comemadre by Roque Larraquy, a book that was so fantastic. I feel so vindicated in telling you about how I pick books because this was 5 fucking stars. This is kind of 2 books. The first half is a novella. It's like 80 pages long that follows this group of doctors as they do experiments on the human body, figuring out the distinction and the transition between life and death. And then the second part is about this performance artist. It's not as strong. This part's like 50 pages, and he is also kind of like dealing with the body. This is really about the uses of the body and the limits of the human body. So a little bit more in depth, this begins by following Dr. Quintana, who is a doctor in a sanatorium in Argentina in 1907, and he is madly in love with the head nurse, this woman named Menendez, who he doesn't know at all. She's like a very quiet woman who doesn't ever like really interact with him. He is obsessed with her, and at the same time he is trying to deal with this obsession and woo her and seduce her, get her to love him back. His like lead doctor, whoever's running the fucking hospital, and this man, Mr. Allenby, who is funding the hospital, he's like an Englishman, they say, hey, all the doctors, hey everyone, come to a meeting. We are going to do some science experiments in this hospital. I think we're well suited to do it, and I think we could learn some things about human beings. They explain that executioners who use the guillotine have learned that the human head is still alive and like perceiving and experiencing for 9 seconds after the point it's separated from the body. And they have devised this device that keeps the vocal cords intact for those 9 seconds so that they can talk to these heads and see what they're experiencing in the 9 seconds between like life and death. So the doctors devised this plan to lure in terminally ill patients, give them this fake cancer curing serum, and then after a couple of months say, it didn't work, do you want to donate your body to science? This goes swimmingly. They get like 500 people to come to the hospital looking for treatment, and then many of those people agree to donate their bodies to science. They don't give them all of the information. They don't say, we're going to decapitate you, and then ask you for 9 seconds what you see. It's this really interesting thing where they're pretending to be somewhat ethical about it, even though there's obviously no ethics. They bring up issues of ethics. They don't just take the patients downstairs and decapitate them. They make them like sign papers, not papers that explain the whole thing, not papers that say we're going to fucking decapitate you, but papers that say that they agree to donate their bodies to science. During this time where they're pretending to treat patients and then having meetings with them telling them that the treatment didn't work and then asking them to be part of this scientific inquiry, all of the doctors, all of the men around Quintana, they are confessing their love to Menendez. Everyone is in love with her, and it's so ridiculous and so fucking funny. This book is absolutely absurd, and it was making me laugh out loud. And when like the third man is like, she's the love of my life, it's just hilarious. Obviously, they don't get all that much information from the people who they kill. They only have 9 seconds to process and then answer the questions that they ask. So Quintana comes up with the idea of doing these sequential decapitations, where he believes that if they set off a whole bunch of guillotines to go off with an interval of 9 seconds, it will string together a full sentence between all of these people. But before they can do the sequential decapitations, the hospital catches on fire, and everyone makes makes it out alive but injured. Menendez is dragged out by Quintana, who says, "Oh, I can't go any farther. My shoelaces are untied." This is something that is symbolic of something that is mentioned multiple times in this story, something about his shoelaces. And the very end of this part of this book, this little novella, ends with her kneeling down to tie his shoelaces. Unfortunately, I don't really get what the symbolism is. I think this book is something that I do need to reread to grasp everything that was going on, because it was so intelligent. Even though I didn't get it, I still felt the impact at the end of it. Then we switch to 2009, and here we're following a man as he responds to a woman who's written a dissertation on his life. He is this child prodigy who became a performance artist, and he's kind of correcting the things that she's written. He's lived a very strange, messed up, self-serving life, and he is connected to this sanatorium by this lover, his very first lover, who abandons him when they go on a trip, and he meets later in life. He is the great-grandson of Quintana. He does this really grotesque performance art where he uses corpses, and this is just another way that the human body is used as an object. In the first half with science and here with art, there's some theme in this story about wholeness or about your being split. It starts with describing his life as an obese teenager, and he describes himself as being like 150 pounds of the real him and then 150 pounds of the excess him. His first piece of performance art centers around this baby that has two heads, and then there's also this thing where he meets this man who's central to this story, who is basically the identical copy of him. There's a question connected throughout both these novellas of what makes you you, what makes a person a person. When are you just a head, and when are you yourself? I feel like there is so much that I missed in this book, not because it was necessarily really hard to grasp, because it was hard to read it slowly because it's so fucking interesting and it's really short, so you just want to know everything that happens, and there's enough plot that really keeps you moving through it, and it's written so incredibly well that like I was just desperate to read the next sentence, and that made me a little bit less able to be really analytical of it. I would love to reread this. I think I would benefit so much from rereading it. I think you could pull things out of it no matter how many times you read it. It's so intelligent but so approachable at the same time. You don't have to grasp the symbolism, even though it's really dense with it. You can still get a lot out of it. It's sharp and clever and insightful, and it's shocking and disturbing, and at the same time it's so funny in its absurdity. Such a strange book, so fucking dark and so hilarious at the same time. It's also really observant and really smart with its observations, which really works with this philosophical nature of the text. It's not too pondering or meandering. It kind of leaves it up to you to interpret the philosophies that it's putting out for you. Because it's so short, it's so packed full of this vivid imagery and these metaphors that work so well with the writing, and it feels like every single sentence is meaningful and really impactful. Every sentence I was like, holy shit, it was all making me react, and he's able to say so much with so few words. Like at one point he's describing Menendez in this moment where she's like kind of embarrassed because one of the men has confessed his love for her, and it says, if you smashed a glass on her forehead, she would bleed. Hello? That's a fucking great line. It says so much with so little. I did think that the second part wasn't quite as strong as the first, but it was still really interesting with this detached gruesomeness. I thought all of these characters were like egomaniacs. They were absolutely insane, selfish people, and that made them really interesting to read about. Though I really liked the absurd humor of the first bit, and I don't think that that really carried through to the second bit. It was like a little bit more of a somber, gritty tone. I think there were so many connections, both narratively and thematically, between and within the two stories, and I would love to reread this to really catch them all. I want to talk about this book with other people. I want to know what other people think about things. Like there's this thing with ants. What was that? I have no idea. I need to reread it. I should have like picked this for the book club. By the way, this was natural, I promise, even though I'm making it seem like it's not. I've announced the next 3 books for the book club. You should come and join us and talk about them with us. Thank you very much. Okay. If you have read this, I would love to pick your brain about it. Tell me all of the things that you noticed and all of the things that you think that it was saying. And if you haven't read this, I would highly recommend it. It's a very quick read and it's absolutely worthwhile. It was so good. That first half, or even more than that, first 2/3 was fucking fantastic. I think the next book I'm going to read here is The Nursery, but I'm honestly not 100% sure. So when I'm done with one of the other 3 books, I will see you so we can talk about it. Hello, I'm here to talk to you about The Nursery by Szilvia Molnar, a book that I picked out mainly because of its absolutely awesome cover. This deserves all of the awards. This deserves everything. I also liked that it had blurbs by authors that I enjoyed, but I think that those blurbs set up my expectations for something different than what this was. I was thinking that maybe something like crazy was going to happen, and then it kind of just ended up fizzling out. I'm going to tell you about it, but there isn't much narrative in this story. There's almost actually no linear narrative. It bounces all over the place. Generally, this is a novel about postpartum depression and the isolation of being a new mother, which meant that it was obviously geared towards a really different audience than myself, but I still enjoyed it. It just wasn't like my favorite book of all time. I think I really would have loved it. This is so fucked up to say, but I really would have loved it if it had ended in some sort of like crazy tragedy or like insane situation happening, because it did feel like it was building up. This mother, absolutely new mother, like baby is freshly popped out. She's dealing with losing it a little bit, having absolutely no sleep, and also not very much support from her husband, and being completely unable to leave her apartment. So she's just stuck inside with this baby that has these overwhelming needs, and she can't sleep, of course, like all new parents can't sleep. And so she's kind of like losing a little bit. She's leaving her coffee cup in the freezer, and she's having these intense but sort of distant thoughts of hurting the baby. And as messed up as it is, I do like to be shocked, and I think that I would have enjoyed this book a little bit more if I had been shocked. I think it was as good as it could have been for me. It's sort of like meandering, like I said, there's no linear narrative. It's kind of just her meditations on lots of different things. On her new life with this baby and her life with her husband before the baby. On her work as a translator, which is something that I'm always really interested in, and I did really like how it was explored in this. It's told with this prose that feels at some points like it's trying a little bit too hard, and then at other points like it is very beautiful and thoughtful and insightful. So you kind of get a mix there. I got the feeling, based off of her explicitly saying it, that this author thought she was like maybe the first person to write a story of like a postpartum mother. And I understand that men have ruled the literary world for like hundreds of years, but also at this point in time, like when this was written, I don't know, in like 2023 or something, I don't think you're the first person writing about how to change a diaper. And it will ask questions like that. Has anyone ever explored in literature how to change a diaper? Well, yes, they have. Paired with the writing style, it could feel a little bit self-important at times. I told you that I was going to tell you what this is about. That's really it. It says in the summary that she develops this relationship with the older man who lives upstairs, and both of them are struggling. He has recently lost his wife. That's not really central to the novel. He comes over often to complain about the baby crying, and sometimes she makes the baby cry so that he will come over and she can have some sort of company. They have like a few conversations. There's very little dialogue in this book, so you don't really feel like you get to know him very well. I think that there was this sort of larger metaphor with him and like sucking her down into his depths of grief and depression. At one point, she manages to leave her apartment at the very end. She goes upstairs to his apartment, and his wife, who's died recently, was like a moss woman, like a botanist, but for moss. I can't remember the word for it. And she goes upstairs, and there's a carpet of moss all over his floor. The reason she's gone up is because she can see that there's water leaking from the ceiling into her bedroom, and she's like, this is going to collapse and it's going to kill my whole family. And that, I think, was trying to say something about how if she continued this relationship with this man, he was going to take them all out with him. And then the book ends with her managing to leave her apartment with her husband, who's been begging her to do something to help herself. And when she goes downstairs, she sees a notice on the apartment building's corkboard that says that this older man has died. This does end a little bit hopefully, because she has finally managed to pull herself out of her isolation, her really self-imposed isolation, but also not necessarily, also externally imposed, because her husband, like when she's reflecting on their time together before the baby, he seemed like he was maybe like a kind, thoughtful kind of guy who was really helpful. And then once the baby comes, he's like, basically, this is a woman's job and you can do it yourself. And also, why are you depressed? There's no reason for that. You need to get outside a little bit more. The writing was moody and melodramatic, but also kind of measured and very factual. I felt like it was building this sense of dread and exhaustion and desperation that kind of fizzled out. It didn't really lead anywhere. And I think that was really like my main problem with it. I would have been okay with reading her meditations on new motherhood and the body and translation. Oh my God, I love issues of translation. And that was a theme in this. Like, it wasn't just that she works as a translator. The theme of like untranslatability was something that she was seeing in other aspects of her life, like pain scales. When she goes to the doctor, she's like, how do I know that my pain scale is the same as your pain scale? Or even just generally the idea that all of communication has some inherent misunderstanding within it. I loved that part of this book. And the writing, even though, like I said, it could be a little bit like patting itself on the back, I think was good enough that I felt really interested in reading this, even though there was no plot. This would have been so good to me if something shocking happened. And I know that's like so fucked up to say, but like, if there was some violence, this book would have been a 10 out of 10. Or just something that would have made me go like, oh my God, no way. I would have really loved that, because it was building the sense that something like that might happen, and then it just never really did. I think what kept it interesting for me is that it was so vivid and visceral and embodied. Like, it described in just the perfect amount of detail to be really evocative exactly how her body was feeling and how her mind was feeling in this state of postpartum anxiety and depression, and also like in the postpartum body. It was riveting and also horrifying. I like that in this she is both physically and emotionally feeling two conflicting truths. Like, she'll get into the bath and she'll say the hot water both soothed me and caused me anxiety, or she'll go outside and the feeling of the sun on her face will both be a comfort and a stressor. And then on the inside, basically the whole book is about how the needs of her baby, who she calls Button, which is maybe a little bit on the nose, maybe a little bit heavy-handed, this baby that is attached at her hip at all times, how this baby needs so much from her that it's absolutely suffocating, but at the same time, she cannot be away from her baby for even 1 second. Like, she doesn't want her husband to hold the baby. She doesn't want new people to come into the house and hold the baby. She'll wake up from the very little sleep that she gets in this book, and her husband will be in the other room with the baby, and she will feel this overwhelming sense of panic, and you feel it as the reader. I think this was overall a really strong piece of work that just was not geared towards me, like a motherless 20-something-year-old. I did enjoy it a lot. There were things that, just my personal taste, I would have loved it if it had done differently, but I don't think was necessarily a problem with this book. It's like I'm the problem. It's not like it was my favorite book of all time, but I do think that it was well worth reading, and I think that that is often what you'll find if you go to the library and you grab a random book off the shelf that you've never heard anything about. I mean, the first book I read was 5 stars. I'm still thinking about it. I'm making my partner read it. It was absolutely incredible. So you also will find gems. But there's also a thing of that, like, I picked up 4 books and one of them I really don't want to read anymore, and I'm trying to avoid feeling that. So I'm going to read, for the next book, Do You Remember Being Born, which I have somewhere over here. I'm going to read this instead of Rena because I've found myself like a little bit feeling dread about reading that book. I don't know why. When I picked it up, I was really interested in it, but I no longer feel that interest. But this, I'm 100 pages in, I'll be honest, loving it. I think it's really fun and it's a really easy to read. I imagine that I'll finish this today. And I've read the 100 pages. I've read that all today. It's just a breeze to get through. It's a really fun book, but I'll talk to you about it later. I'll see you then. Hello, I'm here to talk to you about Do You Remember Being Born by Shawn Michaels, a book that I pulled off the shelf because I thought it was going to be about technology sort of in the way that Several People Are Typing is, which is a book that I really, really enjoyed. This is not quite that. This is not as good as Several People Are Typing, for sure. It is sort of gimmicky in the same way. I'm going to tell you what happens in it. So this book follows a 75-year-old woman named Marion Farmer, who is a poet, and she's like famous. She's won the Pulitzer Prize. It treats poets like they are celebrities, and I think it's really funny, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit later. She is invited by presumably like Google to write a poem in collaboration with their new AI. And I know we're all groaning, and fair enough. This book was written a little bit before the world in which we currently live in surrounding AI, but it is, like, it mentions ChatGPT, but this poem that she's writing with their AI named Charlotte is supposed to be like Google announcing their new AI. And it's like this big, huge event. She has a week to write a poem in collaboration with the AI, and then they're going to like show it to the world. It's going to be the thing that defines her as an artist. So if you can't tell by that really quick summary, this book is not a lot of plot. It's mostly just thoughts and questions and commentary on art and identity and AI and technology and technological advancements. Google flies her out to California, and she stays at this hotel that's off of their campus, and a woman named Rhoda drives her anywhere that she needs to go. A lot of this is conversations between Marion and Rhoda, and then of course it is largely conversations between Marion and Charlotte, the AI. The book does go back and forth between the present day, which is in first person perspective, and then flashback chapters, which is in second person perspective, which is my favorite. I love it, and I liked how it was used in this book. It was interesting not knowing exactly who the voice was when it was saying you referring to Marion, where the rest of the book is I referring to Marion. Like, it seems like it's Marion talking to a former version of herself or an older version of herself. I don't know. It was really interesting, and I liked how it was done. And I never found myself wishing that I was in either chapter. Like, often when a book alternates between doing two things, you really like one more, and I didn't find that with this. Through these flashback chapters, mainly we learn a lot about Marion's life, about how it has centered almost entirely around her relationship with her mother that was very intense. Like, they slept in the same bed together for Marion's whole life until her mom died. And we also see Marion in the role of mother. She has one son named Courtney, who is like 40 years old in the present day, but we get flashbacks on her raising Courtney and how she couldn't really fit into the identity of mother. She had a hard time taking care of him and also being a poet, and she ended up leaving her husband and son because of it. So throughout the book, she's talking to this AI, and she's trying to write a poem within 1 week, which is not really a feasible task, particularly when collaborating with a language learning model that basically spits out nonsense. And she is not doing very well. She's getting really stressed as we get up to the point where she has to be done this poem, where she has to present it. And then she ends up bringing in a younger poet and collaborating with her. And unfortunately, it ends up all being okay in the end. And like, people think that the poem is a masterpiece. And I think that's where this book really lost the plot. It felt like that was its downfall, that it wanted a happy ending. And I think I knew the whole time, because of its earnest tone, that it was going to end positively for Marion. And I didn't want it to, because this book is an example, and I don't know if it was an intentional example, but it is a perfect example of how ineffective AI is at making art. So during the parts that Charlotte and Marion are talking to each other, they're just typing on the computer. Charlotte's parts are highlighted in gray. There isn't actually a lot of conversation between Marion and Charlotte. It doesn't overdo it. In the prose sections, there are also bits that are highlighted in gray. It was kind of just like the end of a sentence or an adjective, nothing important, no choices were made, and I had the suspicion, and it was confirmed by the author's note at the end, that he had used AI to help him. Not really help him, because he absolutely could have written the book on his own, but to make some sort of statement in this book. So the parts of the prose that are highlighted were actually sentences that AI had given him to put into this book. And the sentences that the AI gives him are truly, without exception, either nonsense or completely and utterly trite, soulless cliches. And I felt like that was actually so interesting to see how bad AI is at making art. It has no soul, it has no life, and that is obvious every single time there is a word or a sentence highlighted in gray. Unfortunately enough, it is not overused. I think it was used sparingly and with like a lot of intention. Like when Marion is kind of losing control and sort of starting to freak out because she doesn't have this poem written, there's a little bit more of these AI sentences in the prose part, which is written from her perspective. And I think that that was really interesting and really well done. I don't know 100% if Shawn Michaels knew exactly how how much of an indictment this accidentally was of AI as a tool for art. But that was the effect that this book had. I'll try to find something. Okay, when I put my fingers up like this, that's the part of the quote that's AI. Some days would just feel different in my body. From the moment I woke up, the cereal tasted different. The furniture felt new. That's so cliche. It's really adding nothing to the text. This book is largely about art and meaning with the use of technology, but I think mainly it's about identity. Marion really struggles with her identity, separating it from being a poet. And like she talks to people and people are like, I'm not my job. Like her driver, Rhoda, she's like, I'm a human being. I'm not a driver. What are you? And Marion says, I'm a poet. The book is asking whether being a poet or writing poems is more important to her identity. And with this use of AI, it's really talking about how her identity as a poet is kind of shifting and crumbling if she believes that a piece of technology can do what she does. I think this book was a little bit too ambitious for what it could handle. It just got too big for itself. It tried to get into too many things, and it ended up being kind of really shallow explorations of a whole bunch of little things. And it didn't really directly question or challenge anything with like the ethics of AI, and I was kind of expecting that. Though it wasn't saying AI is this amazing, incredible tool. It did end on this positive note that I didn't love. I wanted the poem to be just meaningless slop, like an AI poem is. While it was really surface level and there's not really a plot, I found the characters to be interesting and I felt really warm towards all of them. Like I just really enjoyed reading about them, and that made it really easy to push through this book. There is also very easy, simple language in this book, so you can read it really, really quickly. And it also helps that a lot of it is dialogue. I think that it was fine. It was not exactly what I wanted it to be. I think that you just should have like really picked something that you were going to talk about and then got really deep into it. And then I think it would have been fun and a lot more interesting. Or maybe it would have had a lot more longevity. I can really imagine myself forgetting this book almost immediately. I did think it was absolutely hilarious how this book treated poets in America. Like it was talking like she was going on Jimmy Kimmel and like people were recognizing her in the street all the time. Like she was like genuinely an A-list celebrity and she's just like a poet. Like I don't think that's even in like the 20s. Like, were people stopping T.S. Eliot on the fucking street like this? I don't think they were. And I think that the level of celebrity that it showed her to have was so ridiculous and over the top, and it didn't really feel like the book was in on the joke, but I thought that there could have been something interesting with that. Like, there could have been some critique of a society that here seems to value poetry and art so much, and how that society might respond to soulless AI slop poetry, and that didn't really come up even once ever. And I just think it was an interesting avenue that could have been taken. At the end of the day, this is my least favorite book that I've read so far, but I didn't regret reading it, and I didn't have like a bad time reading it. It just didn't live up to the unreasonable expectations that I set for it based off of like purely just the font and the text bubbles. I was like, this is going to be exactly like it's going to give me the exact same feelings as the book where he's stuck inside the Slack messaging system. I still believe this has a really interesting premise. It just wasn't executed all that well. It was a solid like 3.75, 4-ish stars, and I'm happy with that. Just pulling it off the shelf, knowing nothing about it, that's pretty good. Unfortunately, I have started Rena, and I don't think it's bad. Don't get me wrong. I don't think it's what I want to be reading right now. I think I wanted to read it when I picked it up like a week ago, and now I'm not really interested in it at all. So I'm like 40 pages in. I do not feel compelled to pick this up whatsoever, but I have a little bit of time before this video is going to come out. So I think I'm going to read something else. Well, actually, okay, to be honest, I've already read a few other things, but I think I'm going to again read something else and see if I end up wanting to come back to this. And if I do, I'll come talk to you about it. And if I don't, I will come and like admit my shame to you. I just think that this book is not like capturing me. It has a really fast plot, but it's not evocative. Like it should be tense and it's not quite tense. And I also don't really care about the character. I'm only 40 pages in and it is very easy and simple to read. It's just not what I want right now. So I have this huge stack of library books beside me and it's like taunting me. I want to read all of them more than this. So I'll see you at one point. Whether or not to talk about this, I'm not 100% sure. Okay, bye. Hello there. I'm coming to you with a little bit of shame, but shame that I'm going to reframe into a lesson to myself mostly, but also to you if you're looking for advice on how to pick books at the library. I did not read Rena. I wasn't interested in it, and I wasn't going to force myself to read it. I read about 50 pages of it. I didn't think it was bad. It just wasn't what I wanted to read at the time. And I have learned that I need to trust my instinct because when I picked this out, I said, I'm pretty sure I said on camera, that it was not the one I was most excited about. I was most unsure about this one. So this is a lesson to you all. Trust your fucking instinct. If you're unsure, don't take it out. There are plenty more books for you to read. You don't need to push it with a book that you're not that interested in. So I went to the library and I got a different book. That book stood out to me because it's beautiful. Look at those colors. Holy shit, gorgeous. This is Cult Classic by Sloane Crosley. I saw it on the shelf and I just thought that it looked absolutely gorgeous. And I picked it up. Okay, so I'm about to tell you what's in the book. And this book is not a book that I liked very much. And I would like to push the blame off of my own shoulders here because I don't think it's my fault that I didn't like it. I think this book is trying to sell itself as something that it really isn't. And that's not my fault that I fell for that. So it's maybe my fault that I read almost 300 pages of it, not really accepting that it wasn't going to be what it told me it was going to be. But I still hold the belief that if this book was what it is marketing itself as, I would have really liked it. It was not that at all, and it was actually painfully boring to read. The general gist of it, the premise, is basically that this is following a woman named Lola. She's out for dinner one night in New York City, and she goes out onto the street, and an ex-boyfriend appears. And then another ex-boyfriend appears. And then another ex-boyfriend appears. And I thought it was going to be a little bit magical in the sense that where the fuck are all these ex-boyfriends coming from? The summary kind of reminded me of a short story by Ling Ma, the first in her collection called Bliss Montage, where she lives in a house with all of her ex-boyfriends. And it is very magical. This is like pure realism, but also kind of like a little bit sci-fi. It's offensive to call it that. It's not actually sci-fi. It's like pushing the boundaries of reality while trying to keep it within those confines. What really tricked me here is that it's trying to sell itself as some sort of thriller. So I thought, it's a thriller. It does say a comic romantic thriller. It's not funny. It's not really romantic at all. And it's certainly not a thriller. I thought thriller, that means plot. This will be interesting. This will have some intrigue. It says it's mysterious. We're trying to figure out what's happening with all of these boyfriends that are appearing. It's none of those things. It's painfully boring. It's so dry, and it has very little substance in it. But it tricks you yet again in the prologue, where it tells you right off the bat that one of the main characters is dead. And she's like speaking to him, addressing to him after his death. So I'm thinking, this guy's going to die somewhere in the book, and there's going to be a mystery about how he died. Maybe a little bit corny, like mystery, murder, investigation books kind of always are, but I thought that'll give it some intrigue. No, he died in like the last 10 pages, and I still, as we worked our way through the book, I was convincing myself over and over again that it wasn't going to be he just dies at the very end, and nothing really happens of it or comes of it. I was like, no, there'll be something. There'll be something, I swear there'll be something. So here's another lesson to trust your instinct. If a book tells you that a character dies and then it's also a mysterious book, that it's fair enough for you to think that those two things are going to be related. It's also fair enough for you to think that the book will be mysterious in any way whatsoever. This wasn't, but it's fair for me to have assumed that it was going to be. However, if it starts getting down, you get halfway through, you're like, damn, it's crazy that this main character that it said was going to die hasn't died yet. Oh, now there's only 50 pages left? Why is he still kicking around? Maybe you need to accept that it's not going to get more interesting at any point, because this book certainly did not. I think it was a really lame choice to tell us right from the prologue that this lead character dies, and then for his death to be at the very end and be almost like nothing, like absolutely not impactful to the story whatsoever. I thought that sucked. I recently read a book with two leads that were like both very strong characters, and the book told us at the beginning that one of them was going to die, and she died halfway through the book. I don't think you can say right at the beginning of a 300-page book, this guy dies and then not kill him until the very end. You're just trying to make me maintain my interest in what you know is a boring book. Okay, so that's how I got tricked by this book. That's how I got tricked into reading all 300 pages of this book that I actually truly had no interest in. And I think if it was marketed correctly, authentically, I would never have picked this up because it would not be something that I wanted to read. It had nothing propelling me through it. Nothing was of intrigue, even though it has this kind of interesting premise of this woman like facing her past because all of her ex-boyfriends keep appearing in front of her. But anyways, I will tell you about the plot of this book. It begins with Lola, and she's at dinner with her coworkers, her former coworkers, and they're all pretty close to each other. There's Clive, who is the aforementioned man who dies, except he doesn't die till the end. So does it even really matter that he dies? No. He was like the big boss, and right from the jump, Clive and Lola are set out as kind of socially equals because she obviously has feelings for him. It seems like maybe they have a history. We learn that they don't really have a history. She's just always kind of had a crush on him. He's always kind of flirted with her. It's kind of been like a will they, won't they sort of thing, even though both of them have been in long-term relationships for most of the time that they've known each other. The other coworkers are Valdis, who is Lola's probably best friend. She's kind of an interesting character, though everyone in this book is incredibly one note and like so fucking mundane. Valdis is a little bit funny. Like while they're at this dinner, she says, "Hey, is there any more of that spicy cauliflower left?" And they look at the table. It's all been cleared away. It's just dessert menus. And I thought that was a little bit funny. Though this book is trying to be funny and mostly isn't, I liked that image. And then the last coworker is Zach, and he's in love with Valdis, and he's the least important one. The four of them had become quite close working at this modern psychology magazine that had ended up folding, and ever since they stopped working together because the magazine died, they had been meeting up like bi-monthly for these dinners. During the dinner, Lola goes out for a cigarette, and she runs into an ex-boyfriend who she hasn't seen in 6 years. They had dated for a while, and they broke up because he wasn't all that into monogamy, and she kind of has to grapple with how she feels about this guy. She had this period of grieving where she didn't really allow herself to grieve. Like she kind of just connected herself to his cousin who was like an actress and just sort of like pushed it aside in her mind. And then when she finally did allow herself to grieve, when the cousin's show got canceled and she couldn't obsess over her anymore, she sort of imagined him as a better guy than he was, kind of got rid of all of his faults. So they meet up, they kind of get into a little bit of an argument, and she has to grapple with who he actually is and what happened in their breakup and how their relationship dissolved. And she's showing off her engagement ring to him because she's engaged to this man whose nickname is Boots. You will notice, he's the only one with a nickname, but you will notice that everyone in this book has a stupid fucking name. All of her boyfriends have idiot names. Her name is Lola. It's Lola, Clive, Valdis, and then Zach. Zach is like the only person in here with a normal name, and that gets tiring. I think it's annoying when authors decide that everybody has to have a quirky little name. Like, do you think the author even noticed that she was doing that? I don't know. I thought it got tired, especially when there's so many characters in this book. Unlike the way the summary makes this seem, she doesn't bump into these boyfriends one after another after another. It doesn't actually happen all in one night like I think the summary makes it out to. It's over the course of a few weeks. But the next day she bumps into another boyfriend, Willis, again, kind of a stupid fucking name. It becomes clear that in her bumping into these boyfriends, she is struggling with her relationship with her fiance, with whether or not she actually wants to marry him. And this is also compounded by the fact that he has made her make this pact where she won't talk about her past relationships, which she has many of. So she's keeping this secret from her fiance. She's also thinking about things that her fiance has kind of made her force herself not to think about, and she's deciding whether or not she wants to stay with him. One day, Valdis shows up at Lola's house unexpectedly, and they end up running some errands together, and then Valdis says, "I have something to show you, and I don't want you to freak out." And she takes Lola to this like rundown synagogue, and inside it has been perfectly renovated into this like very strange building. There it like opens up to an atrium. There's a garden inside there. It's like bigger on the inside than it seems like it is on the outside. It's this really weird thing. And Valdis takes her in. She's like, "What the hell is going on?" And in there is Clive. And like they enter the room and Valdis bows to Clive. It's so fucking weird. It's like a cult thing. This book is called Cult Classic. They like to say it's not a cult, like all cults like to say, but it is definitely some sort of cult of personality. Clive explains this premise to Lola that is kind of pretentious and a little bit hard to follow, but it's also not that deep, and it's not clever, not as clever as it thinks it is. So I think the reason it feels hard is because you think there must be more to this, and there's not. It really is just what it's giving you at face value. Clive has got these people together and created this cult because he thinks that you can direct energy. You can, like, the power of suggestion. If a whole bunch of people are just like sitting and directing their energy and meditating and thinking about someone, they can make things happen. They can make a whole bunch of boyfriends decide to take a trip to this area that Lola lives, and she will run into them. Lola is basically their subject of experiment. He is trying to create a service where he can sell people like the concept of closure with their past relationships. And he's influencing the behaviors of her past boyfriends through social media and through this like directed energy, power of suggestion kind of thing. And he's making these meetups happen seemingly coincidentally. He says, Valdis and I both knew you. We both knew a lot about you and a lot about your past relationships, and that you've had many of them. And we thought that you would be the perfect subject. And we would like you to be part of this experiment. We want you to come back here every time you run into a boyfriend so that we can interview you and gain a whole bunch of data about how the closure is going for you. Now, Lola at once has no personality and an annoying personality. She's kind of this like skeptical cynic all the time. And so she's always saying like, this is so ridiculous. This is a cult. This is so silly. She's always being like incredibly sarcastic. And her motivations are so fucking unclear, because the way she acts and the way she thinks, she would just be like, this is stupid bullshit and I'm not going to be part of your silly little game, and she would leave. But of course, to keep the plot moving, she has to agree to it. So she does. She ends up going back, and every time she's there, she's always like, this is so silly. This is so stupid. I can't believe you guys really believe this. But then she does participate in it wholeheartedly. And then that's kind of the whole book. It's just her running into boyfriends, them talking about their mundane, normal relationships, not really ever coming to any sense of closure, but sort of pretending that she does. Like, I think that the author believed that she did, and I think that the character believed that she did, but it doesn't really seem like there's any, like, epiphanies or anything like that. She'll just kind of come back to the little cult place and be like, oh, love is this. Maybe love is committing to a version of yourself, and that's why I haven't been able to love anyone forever. That I'm a serial monogamist, but I can't stay in a relationship because I can't commit to a version of myself. Like, she's just kind of like saying things. So for probably 250 pages, she's running into boyfriends, she's thinking about boyfriends, she's thinking about past relationships, and nothing is happening at all. Then we get to the very end. Now, she's been trying to get into this meditation room for whatever reason. She doesn't believe in this, so it makes no sense that she's so motivated to get into this room. This is the room where the members of the cult go to think about her, to have these like directed energy experiences that are somehow influencing people to come into her neighborhood. Finally, she's like, I'm just going to break into this place. So she breaks into the place, and when she gets there, she realizes that this meditation room is actually just like a bedroom, and it's full of her husband's stuff, or her fiance, whatever. It's full of his stuff. He has been in San Francisco for 2 weeks, or he said he's been in San Francisco for 2 weeks, because all of a sudden, there he is behind her, and he explains to her angrily that he had hired Clive because he found all of her little shoebox with all of her mementos from past relationships, and he realized that she hadn't really reached the state of closure with any of them, and he felt jealous about it, and he felt like he wanted to know if she was going to be able to actually commit to him. So he hired Clive to do this, and it was all him all along. It was her fiance all along, and she, at this point, had been planning to go and break off the engagement. And then for some reason, somehow she decides, actually, I do want to be with this weird guy who's like hired people to do directed meditations and like influence my boyfriends and manipulate my life. She's like, actually, I'm in love with him and I want him so bad. And she's like hugging him and crying and like, oh my God, like, I can't believe I ever doubted us. Hello? And then all of a sudden, they hear the elevator behind them crash, and Clive was in it and he dies. Now, that sounds really stupid and really out of the blue. To be fair, there is a whole thing with elevators in this book that I don't care to get into, and I don't think you would care about. It's stupid. It's stupid. It's this tenuously connected thread. I think it was set up mostly so that Clive could die in the elevator, and so that the prologue could say that he was dead, and then the book, actually the content of the book, he's alive, and then the whole time you're thinking, when's he gonna die? And that keeps you reading, because I think that the author knew that this book is not very interesting, and she needed to have something that you wanted to know to keep you going. There is this kind of mysteriousness throughout the book with like what's happening in the background with this cult thing, but this mysteriousness is just thinly veiled plot that isn't actually there. It's hiding the really, really shitty plot from us. And it's also hiding the author's, I think, lack of creativity. I think a lot of this book, it was just like, it's mysterious. We don't really know what's going on, because the author couldn't actually imagine what was going on. She couldn't really think it up. Sometimes you read a book with mysteriousness and you're like, this author knows exactly what is happening and is just not letting us in on it. This author was just kind of writing randomly, just writing things and being like, fuck, I'm going to have to explain that. Why don't I just make it mysterious? It's a secret society. Nobody really knows. Oh my god, it was so tiring by the end. At the end of the day, I thought that this book was incredibly pretentious and not very clever. And that is a really hard kind of book to read. That's a really embarrassing. Like, I had a lot of secondhand embarrassment reading this book because it's not as smart as it thinks it is. I think that the characters were unlikable in a boring way. Like, Lola being this person who's like so skeptical all the time, but then just going along with everything because that needed to happen for the plot. I needed more concrete motivations for her to actually find her to be believable or to connect with her in any way. I just didn't really give a fuck about her. I didn't care about her relationships. It didn't really ever give us like information on how her relationships had affected her as a person. Like, all of this is about Lola's past, but then you don't get anything about her past that explains why she is the way she is. Like, anything at all. Like, are her parents ever mentioned? Is anything other than just ex-boyfriends ever mentioned? No. It seems like she's a woman who is just like, she's the sum of all her past relationships and that's it. But also at the same time, we don't get anything as to how her relationships have actually impacted her. This was very dry and very boring, and it was trying to market itself as something that was a lot more fast-paced. Like, you cannot call that a thriller. A thriller? I'm offended. I'm hurt. I can't believe I wasted my time on this. I don't think it was the worst written book I've ever read. If you're like a heterosexual woman who's living in New York and you've had like a lot of relationships that you haven't really got closure on, you've dated like a lot of men, maybe you'd like this. Like, I don't think it's necessarily bad, but for what it was trying to tell me that it lived up to none of it. Even just this cover that tricked me. Like, if you look at this, I'll pop it up on screen so you can see it better. It looks mysterious. It looks like there is some mystery in this book. There isn't, because it's like all of a sudden at the end we get this twist of who was really behind everything, but it was never set up that that was anything that we should be thinking about for the entire book. Like, it was just like, oh, actually, this is what was really happening. It didn't actually connect to anything that had been going on. It was just like, oh, it's a different person than we thought who's behind it all. That's silly. That is not mysterious in any way. That's just a twist that was kind of like halfway cobbled together. It was easy enough to read, but it wasn't interesting at all, and I am happy to be done with it. And that does close out this video. Unfortunately, we have ended on the worst book that I read for the video. We started really strong, crazy strong, and now we're ending on a low note. I didn't like this really at all, and I still don't think that was my fault. But I don't know how I could have known that it wasn't going to be anything that it said it was. So my closing thoughts are, go to the fucking library. Go to the library, look at the shelves, pick up things that you think are interesting. If you don't have a library near you, that sucks. And I genuinely feel sorry for you. I know it's a huge privilege that I have access to many wonderful libraries in my area. If you're going to a bookstore and you're trying to take this advice, you need to be so picky. Like, genuinely, maybe it's just me because I don't purchase books. I almost exclusively read library books. If I don't like a book that I've bought, I'm like counting out. I'm looking at my bank account. I'm thinking, I spent I'm in Canada actually. I spent $40 on this book and I didn't even like it. It wasn't even that good. You got to be so incredibly picky. I If I had just been buying books, I probably wouldn't have even bought the book that I liked the most here because I don't want to spend $35 on a book that is 100 pages because I'm going to read that in one sitting. And like, hello? That's so expensive. My time is worth more than that. So to sum it up, my advice actually really only applies to libraries. So if you have a library and you think my library sucks, my library doesn't have any good books at it, I implore you to just like spend a few hours looking for some books, like actually really dedicatedly looking for some books. You have to commit to it. That's my final thought. Thank you for watching this video. I'm happy that you're here, and I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.